Welcome to the Waves of Change podcast, where we aim to inspire the listener to awaken to their purpose and take the action required to live life on their own terms. My name is Darragh, confidence and mindset coach, speaker, entrepreneur and humanitarian. I will be sitting down with creators from all walks of life who grew through the waves of change in their lives to be making the impact in the world they are today. We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the country we are speaking on today. We recognise their continued connection to the land and waters and thank them for protecting this coastline and its ecosystem since time began. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people who may listen today. Sorcha, the fulfilled woman. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. I've had a great day.
Good. I thought I didn't have you for a minute. I was going to send you a strongly worded message.
No, you had me. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Fantastic. So Sorcha has a back. Do you know what? I'll let you explain. Why don't you give the listeners a rundown of your story?
Yeah, my story could take a while, but I'll give you a clue of who I am. So I'm Sorcha. I'm an Irish woman living down under in New Zealand. I am a coach. I'm a mama. I'm a retired midwife. I love the ocean. I love all things adventure. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into all of those things today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on here. I'm really excited to get to hear your story and learn from your wisdom. So if you want to bring us back, what part of Ireland are you from, Sorcha, and what was like there growing up?
So I am from Dublin. I'm from Dublin 4. Just if you have any Irish listeners, they're all gonna start chuckling away and be like, ooh. So I already know where this is gonna go. I know. So I guess growing up in Dublin 4 kind of set the scene in that you can probably tell I didn't fit in very well. So from the get-go, like my dad is Polish, he's a Polish immigrant. And growing up in, very homogenous country, everybody's kind of from where they're from, and being brought up without a religion in Ireland was also like that set the stage then. And both my parents are creatives, so everything kind of situated me to be on the outside of the norm of life in Dublin 4. So that's where I'm from. So like I had a beautiful childhood. I have an amazing family. They're gorgeous. There's a lot of love in our family. I've got 2 sisters, but there was also a shit ton of chaos and stress. Both my parents are entrepreneurs and we're very much outside the norm in Ireland at that time. So there was a lot of unpredictability and a lot of stuff going on in the background that as a child I didn't know. And so it was only when cracks started to appear in my life that I thought, oh, maybe there's some layers to this idyllic childhood that I had that wasn't so idyllic, really. And I say that with love, Mum and Dad.
Yes.
They know the story.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that. And just what you said about, growing up in Ireland outside of religion or not having a religion. Can you let us in on what that was like?
Yeah, 100%. So like I knew like it was different because Mum and Dad they just wanted to take a step outside the church. Both of them had been brought up in the Catholic faith, but had made the decision that they no longer wanted to support the church as an institution. They both kind of you know, have their own version of spirituality. But it meant, you know, there wasn't a local school for me, you know. I had to go to a German school, which was fine, but it was also, you know, I had to travel to that, where all the local kids just went to the local school. But because it's obviously run by a Catholic board, and that wasn't an option for my parents, like straight away from the get-go, I was outside of things. And kids couldn't quite get their head around what nothing meant. They'd be like, oh, if you're not Catholic, you're Protestant. And I'd be like, no, I'm not Protestant either. And they'd be like, well, what are you? And I'd be like, well, I'm nothing. And they'd be like, you know, because you're not foreign. And if you're not Catholic and you're not Protestant, it was like, how can we put you in a box? And I would say things like, I'm nothing, or I don't know. And like, I think that affects a kid over time. And I remember like all my cousins and like my friends like making their Holy Communion and just being like, why can't I do this? Like, why do I not belong? Like, do I still have sin? Like, my mom and dad aren't married, because they had been previously married to other people, and there was no divorce at the time. So there was all this like, where do I belong in this culture scape? And I remember like mom obviously feeling a little bit sorry for me and buying me like these beautiful lace gloves and this little bag so that I could kind of fit in, you know, but without that sense of ceremony and celebration that is offered through the church. Like, I really felt like such a longing for that, you know. I longed to be part of those ceremonies and part of those celebrations, and to belong in a community. And when you're outside of religion, that was really lacking in Ireland.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting how the Catholic Church was science back in the day. You know, now if you don't abide by the science, that you're the one that's in the wrong.
Yeah.
But what I want to highlight here, what I'm hearing from that is, unless you have an identity that fits a narrative in society, you're not allowed to participate. And for you to continuously say you're nothing, like just right now, what would you say if somebody asked you that question today?
Oh, you know, now I feel a huge sense of belonging, because I'm like, you know, spirituality, like that great force, like it's way bigger than religion. Like, it's laughing, you know, it's like, you know, and I belong there. And so, and everywhere and nowhere. So it doesn't have, like, it doesn't carry any sting for me, you know. And recently somebody asked me to be their child's godmother, and I was like, yeah. And then somebody else said, oh, you can't be because you're not baptized. And I was like, fuck it, you're actually like, are you trying to take this away? But for me, I don't feel any sting from that anymore. I'm like, okay, if that's you and that's what you feel like you need to try and like exclude me or include me in a certain way, that's about you and your narrative. Whereas for me, I'm like, I'm all about being a godmother. You know, I'll be your fairy godmother if that's what it needs to be, you know, and not in a church. But that's taken me a long time to get to.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. You know, when you peel the layers all the way back, somebody has just decided that this is the right way.
Yeah.
And millions and billions of people around the world have just said, okay, that's the right way. And that goes from all different I mean, the fundamentals of all religion, I believe, is peace, harmony, and love, and everybody looks after each other. I think when man got a hold of it and decided to put their own ideology onto it, it's like, how can, if you're not my religion, you're nobody, or you deserve to die, or whatever goes on in those worlds. Like, how can you be a man or a woman of faith under God, and because somebody doesn't agree with your ideology, they should die? or be excluded from society. And that brings me back. It's huge in my family because my mom was born outside of wedlock, and she was like unofficially the first black woman in Ireland. Um, that that's like a guess, right? That'll be honest, that's a guess. But she was in Ireland in 1956 as a young black kid. Went to um, lives in Finglas, just a little bit further out than Dublin
Down the road.
Fort. Yeah.
Don't go there.
But anyways, but yeah, the whole born outside of wedlock and coming up outside of the system, but also being black in the process of all of that, like in the nuns school. It's a great, actually, it's a really good photograph. But in at a communion, the whole class, they're all in white. I think there's two teachers there. It's a fucking great photograph. But my mom's the only one smiling in the whole thing. Big, huge smile. But anyways, not to take that away, coming back to you, because I have the same belief. I don't, like, where our children won't be put through any religious system. They will learn however they want it, and if they choose that for themselves later on, then that's their choice. But putting people in boxes is definitely not what I'm here for.
Yeah, and for me, like religion, it's like introducing a middleman between you and God, or you and source, or you and spirit, or you and, the trees, whatever it is, your belief system. And for me, like, I don't want anything to separate my kids or myself from spirit, so I don't need anybody else's interpretation or permission anymore for me to be in that dialogue and be in ceremony with it. So.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm curious, Dublin 4. It's literally, it's what would I say? It's probably about 10 minutes from my house, but a world away in comparison to lifestyle and surroundings, everything about it. So where exactly did you grow up in D4? And what was life like growing up there?
So I don't know before I was 2, but when I was 2, we moved to Marine Drive, which is, if anybody remembers where Quinsworth was, if you walk from Quinsworth down to the sea, we were the last few houses on the right before the beach, and so right next to the chimneys, really.
Sandyford.
No, Sandy Mount.
Sandy Mount. Sorry, Sandy Mount. That's right.
Sandy Mount. Exactly. So really, like, beautiful village, and we were really lucky. We're in like a terrace of 6 houses, but there are 3 together, and we all shared a garden. And so my neighbor's house, she had a daughter who's the same age as my little sister, and she has a daughter who's the same age as me by 2 days, and an older son who's the same age as my older sister, and then she had another little boy. And so we all just hung out together. They sometimes had to lock the back door when they went to sleep so that they wouldn't wake up with me in their house, because I was an early riser, like, because we all shared the back garden, like, and my parents both worked, and Nollaig next door was a stay-at-home mom, and this was just like heaven to me. I was like, what do you mean there's a mom in that house? Like, I want to be in there. And she makes her own bread, and she like makes jam, and they had like roast chicken on a Sunday, and like, I don't ever remember having roast chicken growing up in my house. So I used to spend a lot of time in theirs, and they used to come into mine. And again, like, their family life was a world different to ours, but we are family, like. And then we're number 3, they were number 2, and in number 1 there was another family, and again those kids were older, but we used to go into their house and listen to punk and get an education, and it was fun. It was fun. There was a lot of freedom. We used to play tennis on the road and football on the road. And then like when you'd see the bus come, you try and gather up all the balls and get back to the path, you know. That was, yeah, it was really, we had a lot of fun growing up there. But again, like always, like I didn't grow up with money, you know, so like, you know, yeah, I remember like just not having that ease of like the same clothes as people or the same stuff till much, you know, later in my childhood when mom and dad started to do well in their business. So it was always knowing that there was that, again, like those layers of religion, but also like there was so much wealth in that village, you know, like, and when you knew that was different to how it was for you, it was also just like another little isolator, or another like, how are they doing this, you know? And like I used to spend a good bit of time down in Ringsend as well, and sometimes I, you know, just feel, oh, like maybe these are my people, but I didn't quite fit in there because they'd know I was from Sandymount too. So it was like this no man's land. And, you know, that's what I find very much living in New Zealand too, is that Māori culture is so similar to Irish culture, like so similar, you know, like the waiata and the songs and their community, like that's like my culture. But because I'm white, I'm much more like the Paki or the British. And I'm thinking like, fuck, I'm not like the British at all. Like, you know, we're the ones who've been colonized. So again, like in New Zealand, I find myself in this kind of no man's land of caught between different cultures. So it's just been a really interesting life journey to find myself in these situations where, yeah, there's a sense of not quite settled in belonging.
Yeah, and thank you for raising all of that. Just what's ringing true, not ringing true, but what I'm noticing is, or what I'd like to know is what the impact of, you know, not fitting in one into religion, into that square peg, or the round square peg into the round hole, and then the same with, you know, although you're growing up in Dublin for not having much, like not having the same money as, you know, or the wealth or whatever you explain it by, as your neighbours. But what sort of impacts that like for you as you got later into life and even up to today?
Yeah, thanks, Darragh. Like that really has been my journey. So when I was about, I remember becoming kind of really conscious of it at about 11 or 12, that I was just like really different, you know, that there was something going on. And it was like I'd missed the memo. I was like, fuck, these kids have it worked out, you know, they know how they should be acting. They just don't have that same, like, not hesitancy, because I was pretty confident. Like I thought I was a bit of a badass when I was a kid. But it was like that didn't quite work. And so basically I started to get really anxious and really like all consumed by working out how to fit in. So I would like just try on these different personas and try and say, like, you know, which is awful now in hindsight. Like I used to lie and say, you know, we'd gone to Euro Disney when we hadn't, you know, and I'd think about sending people postcards, you know, to just see like, okay, how can I fit in? And this became just my, yeah, like my all-consuming thing. I was like, how can I make it so that I belong? How can I get these people to approve of me? And I was like, just always so conscious of everything outside of myself. You know, it was always like, what are they thinking? What are they going to think tomorrow? How can I keep this going? And there was a level of chaos in my house, and then there was a level of chaos in my mind, and it just spiraled out of control. And by 13, my mental health was like just not in a good place. And that's where I kind of entered the mental health system. yeah, I had a suicide attempt. I started using food, and controlling food and restricting food, or you know, purging, or vomiting, to just give me any sense of control. Like, if I can get through the day without eating, then I've got like some discipline, and I fit in here. And so those are the kind of things I used to cope with my teens. In a couple of years I found boys and I used them too, and it was like, yeah, if I could get this guy to choose me out of everybody, then it meant that I was worthy, then it meant that I belonged. And when I was 16, 17, I would have gone for people, like men who were a lot older than me, in positions of authority. And so then it meant that if he had chosen me, I was like your predator's dream, basically. If I could make that relationship work, then it was that sense of validation. And so that all comes from just seeking belonging, just this little girl who just is so lonely and like knows inside she's worth something, and she's just trying to figure out how that fits in with the greater world. And yeah, so I was in relationships that weren't very healthy throughout my teens, and then I went to university and got out of a particular relationship that was definitely not very healthy, and that went okay. University went pretty good. Had a lot of fun there, but again, like, just a sense of loneliness. And I guess, yeah, I think sometimes I just haven't quite found my spot there yet, or I didn't find my spot there. And then in my final year of university, I came across this guy and I thought, I like him. He's pretty hot. And we got together and had some fun, probably a little bit too much fun. And then 3 weeks later, I discovered we were having a baby. And so that has been the journey of our 20 years together. So it was the days before mobile phones, or at least before, like, I think we had mobiles, but we certainly didn't turn them on all the time. We definitely didn't carry them in our pocket, and so I found Shane and let him know that we were going to have this baby. And yeah, that was a big shift in my life. That was a pretty pivotal moment. And yeah, I can pause here, or I can carry on in my story and let you know what continued.
Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
20 years ago. But
yeah.
What age were you at that stage?
Yeah, I was 20, 21.
21, yeah. 21. And just before I'm happy to mouth around, but I want to come back to, and what you've learned about trauma in the last while, and that little girl, and I believe she was 11 years of age, 12 years of age, when she started to realize she didn't fit in, or that you were living in a different world, even though you lived in the same street. So, what would you highlight about that for the listener in regards to, the way a lot of the time people believe that trauma is gruesome and gory and bloody and all of the things, like, car accidents and things like that. But, for the little girl who was that age and she's internalizing what's going on for her, can you speak into the impact that has on not only on you in that moment, but more into the future and the lasting impact it has in your life?
Yeah, 100%. I can speak into that. And like the second half of my story will show you not only like how it affected me, like I say, in my teens, but then like how I then passed that on to my children, and how it continued. So in terms of, I never realized that there was trauma in my childhood, because like you say, people picture car accidents, or they, picture kind of devastation, or even like, you know, in terms of other people, we think trauma is growing up in neglect. We think trauma is growing up in abuse. But for me, what I know now is that, like, behind the scenes, my dad comes from a like a background where there was really severe abuse, and you know, they didn't have the tools that we have now, you know. And so again, my dad was a young dad, and he learned not to be physically you know, lash out at us by the time I came along, but he used to withdraw. And I know that now. I didn't know that at the time when I was really young, but since we've talked about it, he said, you know, like, we were best friends, but then I used to go like deep inside myself, you know, when I wasn't feeling very good. And what I know now about trauma is that for my little girl, for me at like 3, 4, 5, 6, like, my dad withdrawing will have been like just being abandoned. Like, he was there for me, and then suddenly he wasn't, even though he was physically there. And it's the same with being an outsider. You have this community that on paper are kind of there for you, but you're also not allowed in, you know. And so that can be so traumatic for a kid, where belonging, you know, is one of our basic human needs, you know. We say belonging, but what it means is love, you know. And when we're looking for belonging in our community, or, you know, how we grow up, and that's not coming from friends, like, that feels like you are not loved. That feels like you are not worthy of love. And because kids are so egocentric, we turn it back on ourselves and we think, what's wrong with me? You know, and so we enter into this pattern of trying to fix ourselves and fix what we've done wrong, even though it's nothing to do with me, that dad had this upbringing and he needed to cope in the way he did, you know, or that you know, the people around me were embedded in religion. Like, that's got nothing to do with me. But because as kids, when we experience trauma, we just reflect it back on ourselves. That's probably had the biggest impact. And I think coming to a place where I've separated myself from that, like myself on a soul level, but also on a human level, and realized it wasn't about me, has been huge on my journey. And that, yeah, that might be something for your listeners, is to just even breathe a little bit of space between who you are and what happened to you, because they're quite separate when you get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Thank you very much, Sorcha. Two things, just quickly. I'd like to ask you, what would you, you know, for people who have children who are parents now today, in today's world as well, as you are. I believe you've got 4 kids. Is that right?
Three
3.
girls.
Well, you've got 4 now.
Got 4 now.
But yeah, you know, what would you say to people who are parents today, and have kids around the same age? What could they, you know, look out for, or how could they show up, or even what could they look out for to recognize if their child or children are starting to, you know, suffer with their mental health or internalize their struggles?
Yeah, thanks, Tara. Like, that's a massive question for me. As well as being a coach, I run an organization that's solely dedicated to teens, and now preteens, around mental and emotional health. So this is a question I deal with a lot. It comes back to 2 things for me. If you're a parent at any stage of parenting, you can have a baby, or you can have a, you know, a teen like we're talking about now, or 11, 12. And it comes down to loving them and loving yourself. You know, and not in a kind of like airy fairy way, but in like, you know, Darragh, we've been talking a lot about the nervous system, but like in our body, you know, the best thing a parent can do for their child who is showing any signs of anxiety or depression or, you know, OCD or, you know, not sleeping well or using their phone to cope, all these kind of things, is to think like, how am I being as a parent? You know, like not what can I show them or what can I teach them or how can I guide them, but literally as you walk around the house, like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel yourself that you're stressed about money, or you're stressed about your kids, or you're stressed about work, or you're stressed about anything? That is like a cocktail for your children. They did this amazing study of hotel workers that were in really high pressure situations, and they swabbed their saliva for cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and those that, you know, showed really high levels of cortisol, they also swabbed their families of all the hotel workers, and their kids and partners had really elevated cortisol levels too. So even though those partners and kids weren't in the high pressure job situation, parents were bringing home their stress in their nervous system, and it was affecting those kids as if they were in the high pressure situation. And that was so apparent to me in my own parenting, is that because I was so lost and trying to find my way, like my kids, you know, for their first few years were brought up in that soup. They were brought up in a mom soup that was like frazzled, you know, not just, you know, while I was pregnant, things were different. It was like being pregnant for me was like a permission slip to look after myself. You know, it was like, okay, you know, I can love myself because I'm actually really loving this baby. But, you know, once they're in the world and they're pressing all your buttons, you can, like, I love, love, love them. But I would also find myself really irritable or really snappy when I didn't mean to be. And that has had a huge impact on my kids. And I know I've kind of like come around to myself again, but what I realized, and what every parent needs to realize, is it comes back to you, you know, and how you feel and what you're bringing home. And you may think you've switched off from work, or you may think you're not telling your kids about the state of your relationship, but it's our energy that communicates. And again, it's not woo-woo energy. It's like literally, you know, if you walk into the room and somebody's just had an argument, or you know, if you've walked into the room and somebody's having a stressful moment, you can feel it. And that's what your kids are swimming around in. And so by you sorting, and this is not to make anybody feel guilty, let me tell you, but it's something that you actually have power and control to change for your child. That if you can learn to regulate, even in the most simple ways, like simple practices around breathing, around, you know, like if you need to take a 5-minute shower when you come in, you know, feel the water on your face, breathe for a few minutes, and then come in and spend some time with your kids, is far better than if you rush in the door and you're all about them, you know, and you can't wait to see them, but your nervous system is still carrying the stress of the day or the stress of talking to your partner about something. Like kids are just absorb that stuff. So that's what I'd say. First is clean up your own energy. And second of all, just love your child. Just love them. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to heal them. Just let them know that no matter what is going on for them, they belong here. They belong with you. You love them and you have their back. You know, even if they're using all kinds of coping mechanisms like phones and it's driving you nuts, and you think if they just came off their phone, their mental health would be better. Doesn't matter. To say, like, no matter how much you're on your phone, I love you. I've got your back. And if you want to take an hour off your phone, I've got your back with that too. I'll play cards with you, we'll go for a walk, I'll take you to the pool, whatever it is. Just let them know that you're in their corner.
Yeah, thank you. Um, and then the second part of that question is, and as well, it's like empowering them with their own decision making, unless they obviously
100%.
want to jump off a cliff or something. But
Mhm.
just being there, not like a helicopter parent, is that what they say? But
Mhm.
empowering them to make their own decisions leads to them being empowered in later in life to, yeah, be creative, do whatever
Mhm.
it is that they want to do, because they've learned from a younger age how to decide for themselves what it is
Mhm.
that they enjoy doing. Um, you
100%.
you spoke about you food eating is. Am I putting words in your mouth and mentioning eating
No, you're not
disorder?
putting words in my mouth. Sure was. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you got on the other side of that?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I work with quite a few young women now who are in recovery around eating disorders. So it definitely is something that's pretty close to my heart. Like food, like anything else, it it was using it. It was using something in a way that was helping me to think that I was surviving, even though it was probably doing the opposite. It was like my relationship with food has been definitely detrimental to my health, but and my well-being. But it was something that I could fixate on around control. And people will use things like food or like tidying a lot of, and you see, I can't speak for men because I've no brothers and I've no sons. So I only have Shane. But so I'll speak, in terms of women, but men have their things too, is that we can use things like having a tidy house or food to make us feel in control, and the flip side of that is then we can also use it for comfort. So if we have really big feelings, and certain feelings are more socially acceptable than others, like for example, it's totally fine to say, oh man, I have a really stressful day, my stress limit is up to here, and people will resonate with that and they'll talk to you about it. But if you turn around and you tell somebody that you're really lonely, like there's a whole lot there that's just greeted with like, oh fuck, now I don't know what to say. And so if we have those big feelings, or like, being unsure of something, you mentioned decision making, like sometimes when something's going on in our life, we just feel so unsure of what to do. And it's feelings like uncertainty and loneliness, that those are the ones that I found that I used food to just feel better. Like I didn't want to look at how uncertain I felt or how unsure I felt about how to change my life. But a biscuit would taste really good. And so would 10, and so then I'd be able to like switch the narrative, be able to be like, Sorcha, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have eaten that, you're so gross, you've got no discipline. And even though that self-loathing and self-criticism is horrible, for me it was infinitely safer than feeling lonely or feeling unsure. I way rather dealing with those like, harder, harsher, that narrative than to feel alone and to feel lonely. And so all that stuff was very much tied in around eating. If I didn't eat or like I lost weight, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be thin, I'm going to be, I'm going to fit in, I'll be able to talk about it, people will notice it, they'll say you look great. And so like it was so multi-layered. Yeah. So again, like knowing what I know about trauma, that there was just a part of me that just wanted love, it wanted nourishment. And if your blood sugars are all over the place, and that's the most dysregulated place you can come from. And if I say to any of your listeners, if you have a complicated relationship with food, then first of all, just start eating, and just eat regular amounts. Like, don't worry about overeating or restrictive eating or going on a keto diet, or maybe you should just eat whole foods, or maybe fats are good, or maybe sugar's good. Like, first of all, just make peace with food. Just know that food is necessary for our survival, and having adequate amount of food and the right food is like fundamental for your emotional health and your mental health and your physical health. So you can go into all the deep layers as well, and optimizing your diet and all the things, but you gotta heal the relationship with yourself and know that food is necessary. It's part of the journey.
So it's mental, just as you were saying that there, to understand how this is such a big topic. What I also realized, what seems to be only with women, I could be wrong, but from what I see in the world, I've not seen many men with eating disorders. And firstly, I'll ask you, how did you get on the other side of it?
Well, I got pregnant. And again, like that was like a permission slip. I very quickly decided that I was going to pour everything into this child. From the second I realized I was pregnant and we were going ahead and we were going to make a little family, alcohol went, I started eating, and not messing around with food. And it was because it wasn't about me. So my story is a little bit different. And so it wasn't until later that I also realized how deep that relationship went with food, even in not an eating disorder way, but just in an everyday disordered eating kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was how I got on the other side of it in a big way. But if I'm in a really not great space, and it's been quite a while since I've been in that space, like a number of years, I definitely can feel that urge to go back there and being like, maybe maybe if I just throw this up, or I can just feel that voice in there. So I think 100% I'm on the other side of it, but I think there'll always be a little part that's just aware of it in the background or in my history.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, so one of my previous clients, who is from Dublin also, through going through her process, I discovered why she developed her eating disorder from watching Disney movies. So for the listeners as well, as much as cartoons, the cartoons carry many, many subliminal messages. They're not all what they sort of say on the package or something. But so her belief was, she punished herself and didn't eat food, and thought that the more she would punish herself and not eat food, somebody would, like a boyfriend would come and save her. And I was like, okay, where did this belief come from? Disney movies. every single Disney movie, there's the princess that needs to be rescued by a prince or a king or whatever the fuck he was. But the princess was always in distress, like Snow White,
Yeah.
Rapunzel, Pocahontas, all of them. And yeah, that's what led to her. Like, what is she now? She's around 25, 26, but like nearly 15 year eating disorder that she's only making peace with the last couple of years. And for me, because I noticed the racism in these cartoons,
Yeah.
never before did I notice that. So that was a huge penny drop moment for me to hear it from a woman's standpoint and how these subliminal messages, affect them and their mental health and their eating disorders as
Yeah.
well.
100%. And I definitely really resonate with the punishment aspect. Like, once you're in a spiral of self-loathing and you think you're disgusting, then, it definitely is a cycle of punishing yourself. Like, you don't deserve that. You're gross. If you eat that, you're gross, and, the body dysmorphia is real. Like, you can be a size whatever and you look in the mirror, you look down at yourself and you see somebody who's huge, and yeah, it's the same with some of my clients who are in recovery with anorexia. There's a huge part of it that's just pure denial, that's part of the ED is that denial. But they're told that, from themselves, from their subconscious, that if they eat, something bad will happen, or they don't deserve to eat. So it is a really complicated subject, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it to light. Like all mental illnesses and things that we internalize, they deserve to be spoke about. And something you mentioned there about, if you come in speaking about your stressful day, everybody is like, yeah, jumping on the bandwagon. What, yours was like that? Well, you hear what my day was like. Everyone's trying to better each
Yeah.
other at how bad the day was. But speaking about loneliness, and for some reason, Christmas just appeared in my mind when you said that. Um, what do you think is a good way to combat, you know, openly discussing these things? Like, why is stress or my day was shit more relatable or more, yeah, more acceptable than telling somebody you're lonely?
Yeah, and I think, like, that's a really good, because you said relatable, but I think that is the crux of the matter. Is loneliness is really relatable too, but it's so scary, because loneliness is so close to hopelessness, and if you say to somebody that you're lonely, they're gonna have, a couple of responses within their body. They might really resonate, and it might remind them of how lonely they are, and that's a scary thing that they don't want to admit to themselves. Or they suddenly might feel like they're responsible for you, and I think, like, these conversations for me are really important, because, like, they're not just for people in times of mental distress. I'm betting every single one of your listeners has had a time where they felt really lonely, and it's the fact that that's presented as wrong as opposed to part of the human experience. And that's what makes it so difficult, is that when we put things in the bracket of, like, feeling good is great, and feeling stress is not great, but it's still fine, but feeling lonely, like, that's not okay, that's wrong, that's hidden, it's shameful, and it's probably that shame and that kind of silence around them that kind of keeps them that way. It's almost, you know, like a cycle. The less we talk about them, the more potent they become, and the more we can't talk about them. So I think for, you know, people listening, if you do resonate and you do realize that there's times you have felt lonely, you might feel lonely now, like you don't necessarily have to go into, you know, the pub or your mates and announce it, you know, like, oh, I'm going to have courage, I'm just going to announce the fact that I'm really lonely. You know, you can just take baby steps and, you know, say to your partner, you know, like, and sometimes your partner is the hardest person to talk to, so I'll come back to that later, you know, but you can pick that one person, or even say to yourself, like, geez, I actually, like, I feel a bit lonely today, you know. And in the same way as like, oh, like I feel a bit cold, or like, oh, I'm having a pretty good day, you know, like, to just start bringing some of those feelings even into your own awareness and making them like a little bit more okay even for yourself, you know. Like, I do feel a little bit lost today, or I do feel a little bit lonely, and then we can like have that courage to maybe say it to a friend, or, you know, to our partner if you have that relationship, like, you know, I feel a little bit lonely this week, you know, might be COVID, or it might be this, or it might be whatever, you know. And I think we can feel lonely even amongst people, you know. If you've had grief in your life, sometimes that grief will just come back to you, and that will spark a sense of loneliness, you know. But biologically, loneliness is a scary thing for humans because it means we're outside of the tribe, you know. So it's that sense of exile, and it is a threat to our actual survival. But I think the more we remember we're not in those times anymore, you know, that we can actually make it okay, you know, for all of us, all parts of ourselves to be welcome, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to highlight. You know, in today's world, although we are getting really, really good and a lot more open, it's more acceptable to be whatever your emotion. And it's a beautiful thing to see. I was chatting to a girl maybe last week, and, you know, and I also agree with her, who believes that, you know, a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon in our industry just to, you know, make money and do their
Yeah.
own thing, or for whatever reason. And she's basically saying, you know, that it's not right. But like, if you're unhealed and you're trying to, you know, let's say you're trying to sell yourself as an entrepreneur who has grown a 7-figure business when you've never reached above 100,000 in a year yourself, it doesn't fit what you're trying to sell, you know. So she was saying that in the context of, if you've not healed your own stuff and your own story and trauma, you shouldn't be out there preaching and trying to do, you know, what you're doing just to make money. But with me, I hear it, I agree with it, and I also think, and, you
Mhm.
know, there's a time, and, you know, you're never fully healed. It's an ongoing process, you know. And even for our mentors who've been around for decades, um, I think that the more people that are in the, you know, in the open, as long as they're opening up this conversation, it might be enough for somebody to go, if they don't resonate with that person, but it was the start that they
Mhm.
needed to open up, and then they go and find somebody else who is qualified, or, you know, but it opens up the path of that journey, you know, the healing journey. So if we have more people um who are accessible to begin this conversation, I think the more the merrier. Unless they're fucking, you know, treating them like, what would you call it? You know, like that cultist type of stuff. You know, they're trying to dominate or control who it is they're working with. Of course not. But anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. But just to come back to you and your life, and you currently live in New Zealand. And what
Yeah.
was all of that like in your decision making like in that process?
I'm a pretty fast decision maker.
Yeah.
So the reason we are here is I trained as a midwife. I trained in Ireland. This is a can of worms that we probably won't go into today, but the health system and the maternity system in Ireland just was a continuous source of heartbreak for me. And I felt like I was in my workday compliant, or not even compliant, almost like complicit in things that just felt, and I don't usually talk in rights and wrongs, but they just felt really, like you can say, out of alignment, but they just felt so wrong in my body and the way women were being treated. And some, again, the, very complex and very old systems of power we have in play in Ireland, and that come out in things like our maternity services, and birth was such a passion for me, and the empowerment and the triumph of women and that journey, that I wanted to work in a system where there was autonomy for midwives. So basically, so I could control the whole thing. No, I'm only joking. No, I'm only joking. But that I wasn't, yes, I'm answerable to the council and I'm answerable to my profession, but that I would have autonomy in how I practiced in relationship with women. So I I made the decision to move here, and obviously checked in with my family, and Shane said, well, if I can serve here or here, we can go. So I said fine. I applied for jobs in both places that there were waves, and so we came to Taranaki so that I could practice in a way where I could honor my own, I guess, wisdom and my own philosophy around birth and motherhood, but also that I could work in a partnership with women in a way that felt supportive. So that was why we came here. Was also, we were pretty badly burned in the financial meltdown, and I could only listen to so much of Drive Time and Joe, and I just thought, like, this is really just getting on top of me. We could do with a break. So we came on an adventure.
And here they are still today, pushing more fear and propaganda. It's fucking off the
100%.
wall. They're responsible for more misery than most of the gangsters in Ireland, because they're in everyone's car. Your sound is gone.
Sorry, back.
There you go. Yeah.
I was just laughing because Shane still listens to Irish radio here, even though we've been here.
For
been here
sake.
9. I know, and I know.
Is he gonna, when he's off on his surfing trip in the Mentawis, is he gonna be listening to Joe Duffy?
No, he doesn't. Brendan O'Connor is driving us mad these days. I have to listen to him. So it's really funny. The cult of Irish radio continues no matter where you live in the world.
But that's really interesting. And I just, I'm super passionate about that. We've had 2 home births. One was in the hospital, but a separate wing. It's called a birthing suite. I'm sure you've been around 1 or 2 of them yourself in 20 years as a midwife, but and then the same, like upstairs in the room here, we had Bodhi, which was incredible. And Sorcha, who also studied, is a trained doula. She's delivered, I believe, 5 or 6 babies so far, maybe 7. But then she got pregnant, so she's been navigating. Like, she navigated all of that while she was pregnant, and then she got pregnant not long after as well. So she still managed to deliver a handful of babies. But given that, excuse me, you said something about power and being supportive of women as opposed to taking their power away. Can you go deeper into that? I can speak as a man and what I believe, but I'd love to hear from you and all of your wisdom and experience over the years.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just share a little bit about my story and what awoke that for me. As I said, I was pretty young. Well, not that I was young, but I wasn't really planning on being a mom just then when I got pregnant the first time. And we were living over in Galway, and we decided we would come back to my mum and dad's to have the baby, just to have a bit of stability. I won't talk about Shane's surf trip when I was 8 months pregnant to Panama. We'll skip nicely over that bit. But he made it home in time.
I need to speak to this guy. Fucking hell.
He has it so worked out, let me tell you. But anyway, he's
just brought a new meaning to the waves of change.
I'm telling you, he's brilliant. I just love him. He absolutely just lights me up. But anyway, he didn't light me up when he decided to go to Panama at 8 months. But
I love it.
We were in my parents' house anyway, and some of your listeners might resonate if they've ever had a baby, but it is some journey. It's so intense physically and all the ways. And I was in the throes of it, and I was cursing my parents for not having more drugs in the house. I was thinking, fucking hippies, have you like something stronger, but not really. I was only joking. It was only but the midwives came out to me. It was in what's called the domino scheme through Hollis Street, and the midwives come out to you, and then you go in with them. So anyway, they came out to me and they checked how I was doing, and they did an internal and stuff, and they said, it's early days. You're about 2 centimeters, so have a shower and just come in when you're ready. And I remember thinking, like, bloody hell, early days. Like, I've been laboring all night. This is like this hard going. And the other thing that it was just like puzzling me was like, come in when you're ready. Like, what does that even mean? It's like, and so I had a shower and, carried on. And then there was just this sense of knowing. And I don't even really remember it. But I said to Shane, like, okay, we're going or we're not, and I think Dad must have dropped us because obviously there's no parking near Hollis Street in the middle of a city. And we went up in the lift and we went into exactly the same, the birthing suite is kind of separate to that, the main part of it. And hopped up on the bed, as you think they do because the movies.
Yeah.
And, now I know better, but she said, the midwife checked me and she said, wow, you're fully dilated, you're 10 centimeters, you can go ahead and push. And my daughter was born 15 minutes later. And I remember just thinking, like, fuck, I did know I was ready. Like, like I knew I was ready, I could do this. And there was just like this so powerfully, like just this triumph, like, yeah, like, check me out, I can do this. And and that really, that power that those midwives gave me in just that simple sentence, like, have a shower and come in when you're ready. There was just this handing over of the power back to me. And I took it and I ran with it, and I haven't stopped running, that for the first time, I knew that there was something inside of me that knows the answer, that has the medicine, that knows exactly where I'm meant to be, when I'm meant to be there. And since then, like, that has been my compass. And I vowed not long after that I would give that to women, that I would give that power back to women and let, say, you will know. And so I trained, like Sorcha, as a doula, and then went on to train as a midwife. And that is something that I guess as a as a culture. Don't know whether you want me to go on the patriarchy, but it's nothing to do with men, but it's more a system that tells not only women, but also men, you don't know yourself. We know you best, and
Yeah.
we know what's best for you, and it's those social structures of power and control that undermine both men and women, that deep knowing that we have, our intuition, and just like knowing our own mind, knowing our own gut, knowing on all different levels. And for me, like, that's the underpinning of the birth journey. Like, yes, it's a massive spiritual journey, and we can go into that, but it's really the power part is about saying, like, you, and you know what's for you, what's best for baby. And that can look different for everybody. And we've grown up in a culture of experts, and women and men literally feel like they don't know. So for me, it's a journey of remembering that you do, and just shedding those layers so you do know that you remember.
Yes. 100,000,000%. I was born in Hollis Street, by the way, and so are my two of my brothers. Their father wasn't allowed to be present. So just speaking about the patriarchal system, and again, this is what I see as parallel to, what's happening today in today's world is parallel to what was happening 30, 40 years ago. But using different reasons, but to implement the same rules. When men weren't allowed in, and people weren't allowed to visit into hospitals, and men weren't allowed to be present for the woman, and the hospital knew best, and they took the baby off the mother as, like a couple of seconds old, and ran away, where now we know that skin to skin contact, and that connection, and that support from the husband or the partner during the delivery process, both for the woman, and how impactful that is, like in later life. Sorry, this.
Take your time.
Get that out of my face. 1 second. So the whole patriarchal system, and just bringing it back to the importance of trusting yourself, like the intuition. What I recognized in both of the births with our two kids was, when Sorcha was in her most primal state, like, it was godlike. It was like, oh my fucking God. And funny story, the first time it happened, I got really horny. I got really turned on. Witnessing
I like
it,
this.
like, what the fuck, like this. And there was a midwife, and then there was our dealer there, and then obviously Sorcha screaming her head off, and I was sort of thinking, what the fuck do I do with this? Like, what do I say? But eventually I just decided to tell her she was dead sexy, and she absolutely hit the fucking roof. She's like, what? I fucking love you, but get the fuck away from me!
Yeah.
But just the importance of helping people understand the true power underneath all of this. I got to see the statistics when Sorcha was doing her college, when she was doing her studies of, interventions, what leads to interventions, how they crossed over from home births, and I think it was the 1920s, 30s, where they sort of ostracized. Was it family births they were called?
Yeah.
Family births in the home, where the midwife would go to the home, and they would all be at the home, and then it crossed over. I think it was in the 30s to strapping women down on beds like they were psychiatric.
Well, interestingly, before it went to the hospitals and it went really bad, like my nana, she would have had her babies in like the rest home, like so it would have been like a place outside of the home, but not the hospital. So they were pretty like sneaky the way they did it, it's like step by step. Once you get women out of their home, then they're not in their place of power, you know, like they say a man's home is his castle or whatever, but it fucking, you know, women's home is like their queendom, you know, and that's where you go into anybody's house and you don't call the shots. They're the one to offer you tea. They're the one to tell you where the cup is. Whereas if you're on somebody else's turf, there's immediately a power dynamic, you know, shift. You're on their turf.
Yeah, I just got chills when you said that power dynamic. And for you and your like 20 years experience, what do you feel is more in touch with how we could be? I don't want to say should be, because when there's emergencies. We were open to whatever, you know, although we don't agree with the hospital's way of doing things. It's not even a hospital, it's the system. It's this who made these rules.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, when you peel it all the way back, some old man in a white coat, you know, and it's deciding what to do with women's bodies, which I don't agree with. So, what would you say would be, you know, the best way of framing this for people to realize their own power, and that just because a doctor, even because he's given this title and it's a hierarchy in society, and just because he said or she said or somebody else said, it doesn't mean it's true for you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, I am really conscious, you know, that when we talk about the patriarchy, it's not about men. Like, for example, like I was born in Mount Carmel with the nuns and they were all women. And my mom said, no, I was forceps. And like she said, she was never going back. And so my sister was born at home in the bathroom. And so like both men and women in positions of power, be they doctors, be they whoever, you know, even midwives, you know, unless you've healed your own stuff, there's power dynamics at play. And for some people, like I had like a really busy hospital-based practice and a home birth practice. Like I had both, like I wasn't one or the other. And I had the most blissful, amazing experiences catching babies with women in the hospital. And, you know, super stressful things happen at home. So it's like, you know, it's not the place, it's the empowerment. And for most, like I am definitely pro home birth, you know, because it's often where women will feel the safest. But some women don't. Some women, it was a step like almost too radical. And so we would have, well, she would have her baby in the hospital, but in the conditions that she was leading, she was guiding. And I think that what I would say to people is about trusting the decisions is like information is huge, but where's that information coming from, you know, is also really interesting. How is that information being presented? But just actually prioritizing time and space to check in with yourself. Like your body doesn't lie. You know, if you check in, like, does this make me feel like held and nurtured, or does this make me feel not really okay, you know? And there's layers to that, because sometimes people feel very held by medical intervention, but you kind of know that too. You can sense those layers and you can support women with it. I think just be involved, just even small steps, just be involved in your own life. Do you know? Tune into your body, tune into what's going on. Like that's going to stand to you as a mom or a dad if you can, yeah, tune in. And like we use that coach lingo, like tap in, you know, but if you can tune into yourself, even just like just turn that dial up just a little bit, like turn the world down just a little bit, turn yourself up a little bit, and just practice, practice saying things to yourself like, I knew it. Like, I knew that was, what I wanted for dinner, or I knew I wanted to watch that, or, like in the simplest of ways, and having a sense of humor, like constantly reaffirming to yourself, like, I knew wearing this pair of jeans would feel good today. Do you know? Like, make it ordinary so that when it comes to the bigger things, like, what decision do I need to make about my health, or what decision do I need to make about my child's education, then you've already built up this integrity of trusting yourself. Does that make sense, to bring it back to the real ordinary stuff, so that you practice before you start making like massive birth decisions or education decisions or health decisions? Like, just practice having your own back. Like, how many times do you say to yourself, like, in a good way, I knew it, when it's a good thing? We always say it when a shit thing happens, like, I fucking knew that would happen.
Yeah.
We gotta practice
if I
it with
had
the
any
good
luck,
thing.
it'd be bad luck.
Yeah. So start
Reaffirming.
saying to yourself, like, affirm to yourself, like, I fucking knew that was a great idea.
Yeah. I know I'm a sex god. Thank you. You're
Yeah,
welcome. You're welcome.
totally. Yeah. And like, open yourself to that, like I noticed this big time recently when I was writing on social media. If I was saying something that I knew to be true and carry authority, I instantly made a joke or put a smiley face emoji to turn it down. And I realized that I was real afraid of my own authority. And part of that is being Irish, and part of it is being a woman, and part of it is being lots of things. But I then, once I discovered that, I was like, fuck that. I'm not making a joke after anything I say anymore. Do you know? Because I got to own what I know. And that's the same for every human. You don't have to make a little joke afterwards just to make it okay that you knew what a badass you were. Like, yes, I'm a sex god, and then we kind of chuckle. But like, how about saying like, yes, I'm a sex goddess, and then just owning it? Do you know? So it's like just those subtle differences. No matter where you are on your journey, you can always upgrade a little bit. Your soul's always looking to elevate just a little bit.
Brilliant. Speaking of souls elevating a little bit, let's quickly transition across onto your change of career, where you're at in the world today.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty interesting transition. I was pretty stoked with my life as a midwife. It was really rewarding. It was pretty stable job. People are always getting pregnant. My God.
Rabbits everywhere.
Every month people would ring me.
You're gone again.
It's that little button I keep hitting when the microphone just goes to fall. So basically, I was a bit burnt out. I loved my job, but I was running myself into the ground. You don't get much sleep as a midwife. And a knowing started to grow on me again. And once I feel a knowing, I start to listen to it. And it was telling me that, that what I was facilitating with women wasn't just available around having babies. That yes, I loved the clinical skill of like, catching the babies and being able to do all the kind of things. Like, I was pretty good, but that it was really the self-belief that I was facilitating for women, especially in crucial parts of their labor. There comes a part, you're through the first stage, you've been at it for hours, and there comes this moment, and we call it transition, where you're nearly there. And that's when oftentimes the fear can come in like hot and heavy, and it's like your last point of no return. And it's where your whole body just needs to check everything's okay before you surrender. And that part in a woman's labor it's complex. There's a lot going on. And yet it's so simple. It's this simple act of surrender to something much greater than you, but that is also you. And that was my jam. Like that moment right there, I could fucking carry women like nothing else, you know? Um, and knowing I could hold that space, and this knowing grew in me. This is not just about, you know, bringing babies into the world. This is about women wanting to create different things in their life. That might be a business, or they want to create a greater depth in their relationship, and they're just in that transition moment of just not knowing how to go forward, but they can't go back, and they're just in this moment. And so I started to work with women around that moment in their lives where they're being called forward into something, but they just don't know. It's not clear. And so I guess as a coach, I midwife them in that moment of their lives. And in a labor, that's minutes or hours. But as a coach, it's months. And so yeah, I coach women around those moments in their life where they're ready for the next step. They might want to deepen something or achieve something more, but they're done with the pushing. Like in labor, you can't try to get further. You can't work at getting more dilated. You know, that you actually have to let go. And that's my skill, is in helping women to go further in the art of letting go and surrender, and just knowing how to facilitate change in their life without the kind of like overwhelm or the pushing, that energy. So it was pretty scary to leave midwifery. I realized there was a lot of ego tied up in it. I was really well respected here. I was really well known. I was really secure in my job. And so there was a lot of resistance. I thought, like, who am I without this? You know, like, yeah, where again, back to where do I belong? Where do I fit in? How am I needed? And I chose to remind myself that's not fucking about me. You know, that if I was being called into this next step, then get ready for the ride. And a ride of it's been over the past couple of years. So yeah, here I am.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster, eh? I just want to celebrate you and everything. I was part of the beginning of that process, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, nearly at the beginning. I was kind of fumbling along by myself for a little while, making it up. And then I thought, maybe I could do with some help here.
Yeah.
So you
Support. So
did.
look at this is it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I thought, yeah, who can midwife me along the way? And I found Darragh and the crew. So
And here we are.
here we
We're
are.
still alive. We're still
We're,
alive.
we're still on the roller coaster, enjoying the ups and the downs of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. And, you know, I definitely think I'd love to, I don't know how many, you know, or what audience, you know, in terms of coaches, but and entrepreneurs, but I really like to keep this journey pretty real. You know, it's a journey we play out over social media and marketing and stuff. And there's many layers, but I'm one for just keeping it real, and saying it's not all sunshines and daisies running your own business or being a coach. And that doesn't mean I'm not healed or I'm not a badass coach, but it's about knowing that there's always growth and always learning, and always yeah, challenges and stuff. And it's been a lot of fun, but it's also been really confronting, you know, being new at stuff. So
Yes. After like being an absolute master at something else.
yeah, so I
Um,
feel really confident in my coaching. I feel, you know, like I've held space for so long in my life, but like learning to market yourself and you know, run a business, and also like for me to learn not to be running on adrenaline, you know, not to always be under pressure. Like the unlearning of that has been huge for me. So how to run a business with ease, and fun and joy and surrender and all the juicy feminine stuff, that's been a learning too.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because like, yeah, it's a high pressure environment. Somebody comes in I was going to say pop a baby, but to have a baby, it's
Mhm.
like just, uh, would you say, not emergency, but urgency. You don't just sit around and say, oh, look, I'll write this post now, or I'll get
Yeah.
this photo. You're on the clock.
Well, I never put anybody on the clock, but you're
Not the
right
clock,
in
but
terms
you're
of,
on.
but you're on life's terms, and that's the, like, I've had two home births. Like, I can't tell you how natural I think birth is, and you're still dealing with the crossover of life and death, and you need to be humble to that. So you can be pro as
Oh,
natural as you want, but that's the fact of the matter, and that's something that, as a midwife, I was very humble to and sad in anticipation, and in that dance, for sometimes days on end.
yeah, we have like Fia was Friday, and then it was like she was born. So Friday morning at 5ish or 6, I woke up just innately before my alarm clock went. I saw she was pacing around the bedroom, and I was like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, just feeling a bit uncomfortable. There's a bit of movement or whatever. And that was Friday morning, so around 5 o'clock in the morning, and um, we delivered Fiat then at Saturday morning at 3:20. Not Saturday, Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So on the crossover into, but yeah, we were out. We were down the beach. We were walking around. We went and had some food. Like, we were in a place down there called Marks Park, and it overlooks Bondi Beach and Tamarama and Bronte. And midway through on the second day, so it was so Friday she was going through all of this, and then on Saturday it obviously got a bit more, more
Yeah.
pressure, more real. You know what I mean? It's fucking super real anyway. But
Yeah.
we decided to go back down to this park, and she was watching the ocean. I mean, just even the waves have changed. This is how much the depth of the meaning of this um, podcast
Yeah.
holds
100%.
for me. The waves have changed. What you said there, I'll come back to that powerful statement. I think that's the name of the program or podcast. But we were walking around like this dog park, and the waves. Saoirse was tuned into the waves when she was having contractions, and this was close. They were like at 7 minutes. I think below 5 minutes is when you need to be down to the hospital, or is it 2 minutes, something like that.
There's
So
no arbitrary rules. Throw that out the fucking window. But keep
yeah.
going anyway.
So anyways, it was getting closer and closer, but we're in the park that's packed with people, and we're watching the ocean, and then every few minutes it's like "Ah!"
Yeah.
screaming her head off, hunched over me or wrapped around the tree, and these people are out walking the dog, and some doing the coastal walk, but she's screaming her head off. But the beauty of allowing that process to be natural, like
Yeah.
we were in nature, and Saoirse said the most, like, even though she was going through that process, the most comfortable she felt was when she was watching the ocean.
Yeah.
Just when we were down in that park, because she felt like the waves were flowing, the energy and the vibrations were all
Yeah.
in harmony, and it was like
Mhm.
she was at peace, although she wasn't in the water. She felt like
Yeah.
she was. So
Yeah.
that journey took 48 hours, or a little short of that. 3 o'clock, like literally a couple of hours short of 48 hours, was that whole process for us.
Yeah. Yeah. It can, yeah, the length of the process is, it takes as long as it takes,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And there have been times where, yeah, I've facilitated things and I've looked at the clock and thought, I'd be fucking hung if somebody knew what was going on here, you know, and then just breathe and don't look at the clock. Just don't look at the fucking clock.
Oh, stop. But our midwife, she fucking we had such pushback off the medical system. The midwife tried to talk Sorcha out. She told her not to come into the hospital. Then when we got there, the contrast of the home, and then these big fluorescent blue lights, the coldness of the air conditioning and all of that jazz, and coming from, the warmth, and the mother and father was there, all of that. And then your woman's like, oh, you don't need to come to the hospital. And she's like, I need to come to the hospital. And we got there, and then lady, was the birthing plan. No clocks, no alarm clocks, no, we painted out a perfect picture. The lady'd forgotten her watch. So she brought in the fucking clock off the ward. This big, huge thing that it comes out of the pound shop that goes click, click.
You know them well.
Click. And then, there was an obstetrician. So we didn't know. This lady was really beautiful, really sound, really nice, although there was a bit of pushback. But she wanted to do an internal check, and that wasn't part of our plan. And Church was like, no, I'm good. We don't want any interventions. I'm good. This is like, she literally just come out of doula, qualifying as a doula. So she's like, nah, it's all natural here. But no matter how many times we told the lady, she kept showing up, but not only showing up and asking. At some stage, she came in and started prepping the whole procedure, putting the gloves on, putting the Vaseline, I think.
Yeah.
Everything, all of that, bringing the clock in, and we're like, what the fuck are you doing? Because she wasn't saying that in some of the times. And then eventually she tried to do it and says it like a last time. She absolutely cracked it. She's like, I'm fucking having, she went ballistic. I was like, oh, let me sit over here in the balcony and stay out of the way. But yeah, she cracked it. And what ended up being was there was a obstetrician outside the door who was in control over the night shift, and she kept sending the lady in.
Yeah.
To to force it, because whatever her reasons were, that was how the hospital ran its ship. But anyways, that was our story. I want to come back to something. The last thing we'll touch on before we finish up, dealing with the crossover of life and death.
Yeah.
And I want to know what that means for you.
What does it mean for me? It means so much for me. It was like I could almost cry this was my life, this was and still is, in coaching, the privilege of the work I got to do, is really sacred. And on so many levels, in terms of, it sounds crazy, but every time a baby would be born, would emerge, I just think it's a baby. The most obvious of statements, you think, Sorcha, you've been doing this job for a while, but it would be it was so miraculous. Every time, was just this earth will never be the same again. There is a new human, and you just couldn't believe that the world was still turning, it was just incredible. And yet, with the triumph of life and the power and the complexity of it, there, for me, always was the other side present, not necessarily the fragility of life. It wasn't life is fragile at all, but it was just the presence of the other world, the presence of death, the the fact that there is something so much greater than us, and sometimes midwives, sorry, my headphones are talking to me. Sometimes when we're in roles as midwives or doctors, there is almost a sense that you have the power to do stuff, and yes, you do have the power to act and to intervene in a good way and in a potentially harmful way, but there's something so much greater than us going on that we sometimes have no say, no matter what we do or how we act, whether a baby is going to transition outside or they're not, and that's just the fact of the matter. And being comfortable with that knowing and being in the surrender to that has been one of the most incredible experiences and lessons of my life. And I have looked after women whose babies have not made it and transitioned alive, both in a known way and in an unknown way, and being in the experience of that tremendous power of death as well as the power of life, and the process of that, has just been incredible in my life. So and also with women, again, I worked in the hospital where Savita Halappanavar died when, must be 11 years ago now, that brought the abortion debate back to Ireland. That was my hospital. So, and I have been in situations, and I'll own this through no fault of mine, where death has been coming for women, and to be like, that's a very humbling experience, and knowing that around the world that's the case for so many women, that to live, is a gift. And sometimes it is a privilege that not all of us are afforded. And that just makes me so grateful to live, and to just be where I am, and to be able to facilitate this sacred journey of birth with all of that knowing in the background, and not let it be present as fear, but let it be present as a knowing and as of love, because when we don't name elephants in the room, that's when things become hidden and things become fearful, and that will change all kinds of dynamics energetic wise. So for me, it's being able to bring those unspoken and those unknowns into the light, and be able to have the capacity to hold them. And, when you shared your story, it's the fact that your obstetrician or not your obstetrician, but the obstetrician in your story hadn't developed that capacity to hold those feelings that made her want to know how many centimeters or know the progress, because when a human wants to know something, it means they're not comfortable with sitting in the unknown of life and death, and that's just something that takes a huge expansion to hold.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for that. That's such a cool realization for me. People who want to know are uncomfortable in the unknown. I'll keep that one, by the way. I'll keep it. Yes. I'll reframe it. So thank you for that. And I just, I want to commend you for everything that you've done in the world so far, and everything that you are still yet to do. But also women at large and in general, because, what said differently, you guys are the portal between the spirit world and the physical 3D dimension. And I believe you deserve a lot more respect for the part you play in the world. I mean, yeah, well, yeah, huge respect.
I believe we deserve all the respect, you know,
More than
and
men, I believe.
but
Men
no,
that
not.
think.
It's interesting because as you spoke about, you know, we are the portal. We are the portal. We're also the flow. You know, we are the movement between worlds, and that is made for us so beautifully by men who hold us. You know, by men who hold us in their presence and their knowing and their deep belief in themselves and in us. You know, the flow of that portal is just so juicy when you've got, and it doesn't necessarily, you know, if you're in a same-sex relationship, you know, or you identify in different ways, like that's a masculine energy. You don't have to be a man to carry that, you know, but it's that, you know, unity or union of the masculine and feminine working together. That's going to change everything, you know, and that's when we get to be in the all respect, you know, and in the awe of each other.
Yes, I love it. Like we're all one, all individual, all one at the same time, but also equal across the board. But again, I tip my hat more to women, for what you guys do in the world, and I sort of believe that every woman is the center of the universe because of, you know, like I said, crossing that spirit world with the 3D world and 3D dimension. Thank you very much for being here. It was such a beautiful conversation.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for there's like I could probably talk for another 3 hours.
I know. I'm like, we didn't even touch on like so many things that would have been so juicy too. Might have to do another part another day.
I think we will do another part, you know, because there was loads of different ways I would have liked to go.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to lash out a 5-hour fucking podcast and nobody will listen to it. They'll be like, oh, what?
I know. So, that's the Irish in us talking.
Yeah. So, Sorcha, where can people find you?
So people can find me mostly on Instagram, Facebook. Instagram, I'm just at Sorcha Wolnik, or the Fulfilled Woman. And if you noticed that you honed in around the teen stuff, maybe because you have a teen or you know somebody who has a teen, I can be found at girlsmindsmatter.com. So those are the two organizations that I
spelled that wrong. Yeah.
I know it's so many letters all in a row. Girls Minds Matter. And it's not just their minds, it's all of them, but I needed a catchy name at the time.
Yeah, cool. Brilliant. Well, I'll put that in the bio as well.
Thanks,
and
Darragh.
Lastly, what does the waves of change mean to you?
Oh my God, this is a tough one. Can I have 2 minutes? Really briefly, but wrapped up. It's never too late. I always thought I was late getting onto things, but it's never too late. I think I started my surfing journey before my kids were born, and yet this summer has been like the summer where I've gotten, you know, to grips with it. And so like that has been a change, that has been a shift in my world. And so even though it didn't feel like it was coming, it just came out of nowhere. And I think, yeah, that's, you know, it's not linear. You know, nobody's journey is linear. It is waves. It is a spiral. Yeah, and just remembering it's never too late. It's never too late to step back into your journey.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I look forward to having a surf with you and your husband at some stage.
We're not married. I'm telling you, that's part 2 of the podcast.
Okay, fantastic. Sorcha, thank you very much for your time.
You're so welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Have a lovely day. Chat
You
soon.
too. Bye, hon.
And actually, drop a message with Shane. I could possibly have him on here. I'd love to chat with him, an Irishman traveling the world surfing.
With all his girls. Yeah.
All right, go on. Chat soon.
Chat soon, Darragh.
Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If anything resonated for you, please leave a comment below. If there's anyone who may need to hear, please share. I love this. Have a lovely day.